At my birthday dinner, my brother took the mic and said, "I'm suing you for the family heirlooms because I deserve them more." I thought he was bluffing until he handed me a lawsuit. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Actually, you just made a big mistake. I should have known my brother would pull something like this. But I never thought he'd have the nerve to do it at my own birthday dinner." We were at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in Chicago, a place I had picked because I wanted something nice, something peaceful. Just a good dinner with family and close friends, nothing over the top. I had just turned 48 that day, and at this age I wasn't looking for anything crazy. Just a good meal, good company, and maybe a few drinks. It had started out fine. My wife, Rachel, had arranged the dinner, making sure to invite only the people we actually wanted there. That included my best friend Mark, a couple of my old college buddies, my mother, my sister Vanessa, and, unfortunately, my younger brother Derek. Derek and I have never gotten along ever. I'm the oldest, Vanessa is in the middle, and Derek, the golden child, is the youngest at 44. Growing up, our parents treated him like the second coming of Christ. He could do no wrong. He got away with things that would have had me grounded for weeks. He was the type of kid who broke something, blamed someone else, and got rewarded for it. And somehow, even as an adult, he never changed. Now the thing about Derek is that he's one of those people who's always looking for a way to come out on top, no matter what it costs other people. He's entitled, he's manipulative, and worst of all, he actually believes he deserves everything he demands. For years he's been obsessed with our grandfather's collection of heirlooms. Our grandfather George was a World War II veteran and an antique collector. He had a collection of rare coins, medals, and some really valuable old watches, one of which was a 1940s Rolex that he wore every single day until he passed away in 2020. Before he died, he made it clear who would get what. The Rolex? That went to me. It wasn't just about value, he gave it to me because we were close. I spent my summers helping him around the house, listening to his stories, going fishing with him. I earned it. Vanessa got some antique jewelry, including a diamond bracelet from the 1920s. And Derek? He got a couple of things too, some old military patches, a few coins. But here's the thing. He wanted everything. He thought he deserved it all just because he was the youngest. Ever since our grandfather passed, Derek had been nagging me for the Rolex, saying things like, "It belongs to the youngest son, or you don't even wear watches. Why should you have it?" I shut that down every time. Which is why, when he stood up during my birthday dinner, took the microphone from the waiter and said, "I'm suing you for the family heirlooms because I deserve them more," I wasn't even that surprised. I laughed, because honestly, I thought it was a joke. Then he pulled a folder from his jacket and tossed it on the table in front of me. "Go ahead. Read it," he said, smirking. I opened it. It was a lawsuit, a real, legal lawsuit. He was suing me for the Rolex, the coin collection, and some of the other heirlooms, most of which weren't even in my possession. He claimed I had illegally obtained the items, and that because he was the youngest male descendant, he was the rightful owner. That's when I realized he wasn't bluffing. He was serious. The table went dead silent. Vanessa's face turned red with anger. Rachel put a hand on my arm, probably sensing that I was about to lose it. My mother just sighed, like she had seen this coming. Then, before I could even respond, someone cleared their throat. It was Mark. I need to pause here and explain something about Mark. He's not just my best friend. He's also a corporate lawyer, and a damn good one. He's the kind of guy who can take a 50-page contract, skim through it in 5 minutes, and find 10 ways to destroy it in court. Mark reached for the lawsuit, adjusted his glasses, and started flipping through the pages. Derek was grinning like an idiot, probably thinking he had just pulled off the biggest power move of his life. Then Mark said, "Actually, you just made a big mistake." Derek's smile faded instantly. "Excuse me?" Derek scoffed. Mark set the papers down and looked at him like he was the dumbest man alive. "Derek, do you even know what you just did?" he asked. Derek crossed his arms, suddenly looking less confident. "Yeah, I'm suing for what's mine," Mark chuckled. "No, what you just did was admit to fraud in front of multiple witnesses." Silence. Derek blinked. "What the hell are you talking about?" Mark leaned back in his chair. "You just handed over a lawsuit filled with false claims. And you did it in front of over a dozen people, most of whom are willing to testify that Grandpa's will clearly stated who gets what. That means you just committed perjury before even stepping into a courtroom. Derek turned pale. Mark wasn't done. Oh, and let's not forget, if you lose this case, which you absolutely will, you'll have to pay for all of your brother's legal fees. And if you knowingly filed this with false claims, that's malicious prosecution. That could mean damages. And fines. A lot of them. Derek's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. At that point, Vanessa jumped in. "You really thought you could pull this off?" she said, shaking her head. "On his birthday?" My mother, who had been quiet the whole time, finally spoke. "Derek," she sighed, "you should just walk away from this." But Derek? He doubled down. And that's when things got really interesting. Derek should have walked away. Any reasonable person would have. But my brother? He's never been reasonable. Instead of backing down, he did what he always does. He ran his mouth and made everything worse. Derek snatched the lawsuit papers off the table and glared at Mark. "You think you're so damn smart," he hissed. "But you don't know everything." Mark just raised an eyebrow, totally unfazed. "Oh? Enlighten me." Derek turned to my mother. "Mom," he said, his voice taking on that whiny, manipulative tone he's used since childhood. "Tell them the truth. Grandpa told you before he died that I was supposed to get the Rolex, right?" My mother sighed. "Derek, stop." "No," he snapped. "Tell them." Mom shook her head. "Grandpa never said that. He put everything in writing for a reason." Derek's face twitched. "You're lying." "She's not," Vanessa cut in, crossing her arms. "We were all there when Grandpa told us who gets what. You weren't even around. You were too busy blowing money in Vegas. That hit a nerve." Derek had a gambling problem for years. He blew through his inheritance, racked up debt, and even had to be bailed out a few times. Grandpa knew that. That's why he left the most valuable stuff to me, because I was the responsible one. Derek clenched his fists. "You don't know what you're talking about." Mark smirked. "Actually, I do. And here's the fun part. By filing this lawsuit, you're opening yourself up to a lot of scrutiny." Derek rolled his eyes. "Oh, please? What does that even mean?" Mark leaned forward. "It means that during the discovery phase, we get to pull everything: financial records, past lawsuits, debt history, even gambling losses. The court is going to take one look at your financials and realize exactly why you're doing this." Derek paled. "You don't want that, do you?" Mark continued. "Because if the court finds out you're trying to seize assets to pay off debts, this could easily turn into a case of fraudulent intent." Derek's jaw tightened. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out a way to flip this back in his favor. Then he said something insane. "Fine," he snapped. "If I can't have the Rolex, then none of you can." I frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Derek grinned, and for the first time that night, I felt a pit form in my stomach. "You'll see," he said. Then he grabbed his coat and stormed out of the restaurant. The break-in, I didn't think much of it at first. Derek's always been dramatic. I figured he'd cool off and, worst case, waste a few $1,000s on a lawyer before dropping the case. I was wrong. 2 nights later, I woke up to my security system blaring at 3 a.m. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera feed. The front door was wide open. My stomach dropped. Someone had broken into my house. I grabbed the bat I keep under the bed and rushed downstairs. The house was dark except for the flashing security lights. My hands were shaking. I checked the living room, nothing missing. Checked the kitchen, same. Then I walked into my office. My safe was open, and my grandfather's Rolex was gone. I just stood there, my mind racing. This wasn't a random break-in. The thief had gone straight for the safe. They knew exactly what they were looking for, and there was only one person who wanted that Rolex badly enough to steal it. Derek. I called the police. They arrived fast, took statements, checked the security footage, and guess what? Clear as day, there was Derek, breaking into my house. He wasn't even wearing a mask. The idiot looked straight at the camera before prying the safe open. He didn't even try to cover his tracks. I handed the footage over to the cops, and within 12 hours, Derek was in handcuffs. But here's where it gets better. Because Derek? He didn't just commit robbery. He had already filed the lawsuit against me. And by breaking into my house to steal the Rolex, he had just destroyed his own case. The ultimate backfire. Mark was loving this. I swear, I've never seen him so giddy as when he called me after Derek's arrest. "Do you realize what just happened?" he said, practically laughing. "Oh, I do," I said, "but I want to hear you say it." Derek's lawsuit was already weak. But now? It's dead on arrival. He wasn't wrong. Derek had claimed in the lawsuit that the Rolex was rightfully his, that I had stolen it from the family. But by breaking into my house to steal it, he had just proven that the Rolex was never his to begin with. You can't steal something that already belongs to you. So now? Not only was his lawsuit going to get thrown out, but he was also facing felony charges for breaking and entering. And it got even worse for him, because it turned out Derek was already on probation. Remember how I mentioned his gambling problem? Yeah. Well, a year prior, he had been caught writing bad checks to cover his debts. He had been given a suspended sentence, meaning as long as he stayed out of trouble, he wouldn't serve jail time. But breaking into my house? That violated his probation. And now? Derek wasn't just facing theft charges, he was looking at real prison time. And here's the best part. Derek's lawyer, who he had somehow paid up front, immediately dropped him the moment he saw the security footage. Why? Because even the slimiest lawyer in the world couldn't defend someone who literally handed over video proof of their crime. Derek called me from jail 3 days later. At first I thought he was going to apologize, maybe show some remorse. Nope. His first words? "You set me up." I actually laughed. "Derek, you broke into my house on camera and stole something that wasn't yours. You set yourself up. You could drop the charges," he spat. "Come on, man, we're family." I hung up, because at that moment I knew exactly how I was going to get my revenge. And trust me, I wasn't done yet. Derek thought he had hit rock bottom. He had no idea how much further he was about to fall. After his arrest, I assumed that would be the end of it. He had broken into my house, stolen the Rolex, and got himself caught on camera. He was facing felony theft charges, and his lawsuit against me was dead on arrival. But Derek? Derek is the type of person who will double down even when he's already lost, and this time, he took things way too far. The phone call that changed everything. A week after his arrest, I got a call from a blocked number. At first I ignored it, but then it called again, and again. Finally, I answered. "Hello?" A cold, unfamiliar voice came through the line. "Is this my name?" I felt a weird chill run down my spine. "Who's asking?" "I represent some people that your brother owes money to," the man said smoothly, "and we need to talk." Oh shit. Derek's gambling debts. I had almost forgotten. I gripped the phone tighter. "What do you mean, owe money?" The man chuckled. "Let's just say your brother's in deep, and he promised a certain item as collateral." My stomach dropped. "What item?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "The Rolex," the man said. "And when he got arrested, it became unavailable. That's a problem." Oh, hell no. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Derek had gambled with my grandfather's watch, the same watch he tried to sue me for, the same watch he stole from my safe. I ran a hand over my face. "That's not my problem." The man on the phone sighed. "See, here's the thing. We don't really care about your problems. We just want what we're owed. Either we get the Rolex or someone pays up. And since Derek's indisposed, we figured we'd reach out to family." I laughed. "You think I'm going to cover Derek's debts?" I said. "Go to hell." The man's voice turned icy. "You sure about that?" Then he hung up. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The car accident 2 days later, Rachel's brakes failed. She had been driving home from work when she tried to slow down at a red light. Nothing. The pedal went straight to the floor. She swerved onto the shoulder, barely managing to avoid a collision before yanking the emergency brake. When the tow truck arrived, the mechanic took one look and said, "This wasn't an accident. Someone had cut the brake line." When Rachel called me, I swear my blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about a watch anymore, this was a threat. I knew exactly who was behind it, and at that moment I decided, if Derek wanted to ruin my life, I was going to ruin his first. The setup first. I made a call to Mark. I told him everything, the phone call, the brake line, the threats. He listened carefully, then said, "It's time to end this." Mark had a plan, and it was brilliant. The ultimate trap. The first thing we did was let it slip that the Rolex had been recovered by the police. That was a lie. The real Rolex was still in evidence. But we leaked the rumor through one of Derek's old gambling friends, the kind of guy who loved to talk. Within 48 hours, the men who threatened me were on the move. They sent someone to try and steal it back. The problem? The Rolex was actually a fake, and the moment they tried to fence it, the FBI got involved. Because here's the thing. One of the guys behind this wasn't just some small-time thug. He was already on a federal watch list for money laundering and interstate fraud. And Derek? The idiot had signed an IOU, which meant he was now directly linked to a federal crime. The arrest that broke him 3 days later, Derek was arrested again. Only this time, it wasn't just for theft. It was for conspiracy to commit fraud. And because he was still on probation for his previous crimes, his bail was denied. Which meant Derek was officially going to prison for a long, long time. And the best part? The Rolex? Since it was stolen after Derek filed his lawsuit, the judge ruled that it was now evidence in a criminal case, which meant that even if he had won the lawsuit, which he wouldn't have, he still wouldn't get the watch back. And his so-called friends? They turned on him immediately to cut their own deals. Derek went from trying to steal my inheritance to losing everything. And the kicker? By the time he got out of prison, the Rolex would be worth 3 times more, and I would still have it safe, untouched, where it belonged. Final words. Derek called me one last time before his sentencing. "I hope you're happy," he spat. "You ruined my life." I smiled. "No, Derek. You did that all by yourself." Then I hung up, and I never spoke to him again. Derek was finally behind bars. His lawsuit was dead, his gambling debts had caught up to him, and the Rolex, the thing he had been obsessed with for years, was now evidence in a criminal case. But for me, I wasn't done yet. Because Derek had caused so much damage, and I wanted to make sure that when he got out, he had nothing left to stand on. So I decided to bury him for good. The final blow. I met with Mark, my best friend and lawyer, over drinks. We sat at a quiet bar in downtown Chicago, and I told him, "I want to finish this." He smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." See, Derek had spent his entire life burning bridges. He thought he could lie, cheat, and steal his way through life without consequences. Well, not anymore. First we went after his assets. Mark helped me file a civil suit against him for the break-in, damages to my home, and legal fees from the nonsense lawsuit he filed against me. It was a slam-dunk case. The judge took one look at the security footage and ruled in my favor. Derek now owed me over $100,000, money he didn't have. So, what happened? His car? Repossessed. His apartment? Evicted. Everything he owned? Ceased to pay off the debt. By the time we were done, Derek had nothing left in his name. No savings, no car, no home, not even a bed to sleep in. His own mother turned against him. Derek, being the entitled idiot he is, assumed Mom would take him in. But guess what? Mom was done with him too. He showed up at her house after being released from jail, looking for a place to stay. She shut the door in his face. "I bailed you out too many times," she told him. "You made your choices, now live with them." Derek screamed, begged, even cried. Mom didn't care. She told him to figure it out on his own. For the first time in his life, no one was there to save him. And then came the IRS. Now, remember how Derek had been gambling and writing bad checks for years? Well, Mark had one last trick up his sleeve. We sent an anonymous tip to the IRS. Turns out, Derek had been dodging taxes for years, and when the IRS started digging, they found a lot more than just unpaid taxes. They found undeclared income from illegal gambling, suspicious bank transfers, and multiple financial lies that he had used to get loans. Within a few months, Derek was under federal investigation for tax fraud. And since he couldn't pay what he owed, the IRS did what the IRS does best. They ruined what little life he had left. Where is Derek now? By the end of it all, Derek had nothing. No money, no job, no friends, no family willing to help him. Last I heard, he was living in a run-down motel, working under the table at a sketchy auto shop, barely scraping by. The Rolex? Still mine. The heirlooms? Still mine. My life? Better than ever. And Derek? Derek is a broke, bitter loser. With no one left to blame but himself. Final words. Derek spent his whole life thinking he could take whatever he wanted. That the world owed him something. That he could lie, steal, and scam his way to success. Instead, he lost everything, and I didn't have to lift a finger to destroy him. All I had to do was let him destroy himself. And that was the best revenge of all.